So, ladies and gentlemen, have a little bit of connection problems, but we have solved them. So, hello also, John Barnwell. Now, first of all, before we start with the Pew, breaking news from London. There has been a couple of stabbings not far from where Reverend David actually lives, in Streatham, which is near Clapham, and actually in front probably of your brother's house, so more or less next to it. And we are talking here about another case of somebody going around stabbing people with some kind of fake device attached to him. Fortunately, we didn't have anybody dying, but we have had at least 2 injured. So please, David, report on this latest news before we enter the Pew.
Well, I mean, all I can say is the British police are going berserk. Clapham is 3 miles roughly from Streatham. My kid brother lives in the Streatham area. It's really not far from his house.
So I mean,
and there's been a senseless attack, you know, and it's happening nearly every week now in London. It's getting unlivable here.
Now, we know that you are actually trying to bring together, in your capacity as a minister, people of different sides of the Abrahamic faiths, so Jewish people, Islamic people. However, these attacks are always to be blamed on fundamentalist Islamic people that seem to have some problem in integrating in the in the society that they live in England, no?
Well, I try and keep out of the politics of this wonderful show, because at the minute we're not talking about British politics, I feel out of my depth. You know, I've never lived in America. I don't really want to talk about the American situation. You know, in the same way, I feel a little uncomfortable about talking about European affairs, although I understand European affairs more than I do American affairs. You know, it's like being a goldfish looking at something interesting.
David, what do you think is really the problem here when you have now in the last few years? Sorry, somebody needs to put down the volume. I think either is low or low. Okay, so what is the problem here? I mean, you must know, you have boots on the ground there. You are actually in London, and these attacks keep on occurring, and often, unfortunately, they see as protagonists these Muslim people who don't integrate in England that well. I mean, that seems to be the problem. Then, I mean, I don't live in London any longer, so maybe you, in your capacity, are more able to give us some kind of perspective.
Well, as I say, you know, that was a long preamble to this point. New Labour is to blame, sadly. They went through a period when they were ascending to power under Tony Blair of leaving every community to its own devices. Some people see that as very cynical economics, by the way, not just, you know, hands across the sea sort of thing, but we don't want to fund inter-community projects. We don't want to fund the wider society. So it's caused a type of fragmentation that hasn't been known in this country for hundreds of years. And, you know, as I said before, Leo, we're not looking at the gentle, mystical types of Islam that I'm used to in Central Asia, you know, where old ladies invite you to light candles with them, you know, and prayers are said after dinner. You know, that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at quite violent strains of Islam who have come here, sadly, to punish and get revenge. How do I know that? I'm not just speaking as a man, as a minister clutching at straws. There is a mosque in Brixton, which is, and I don't want to say more than that, which is effectively an organization for the Nation of Islam, which of course is not Islam. That is black power, and that is, you know, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad mythologizing about the fact there was a time in Africa where everybody was black and everybody was Muslim. I mean, this is ridiculous. And they have been approaching the British government as well as the local government for a number of years to try and get representation, because they're saying things like they understand the anger of the Muslim community. Therefore, they have more of a connection with these young hotheads than other organizations like, mainstream Islamic groups. I know that's not the case. I know that's not the case. But what is coming here tends to be, again, we're back to our old friends, the Salafists, the Wahhabi. Has Britain been a saint through the centuries? Of course it hasn't. But, we're in the 21st century and it's time to integrate as different communities. A lot of these young hotheads are looking for revenge. They're not looking for anything else.
We are discussing, for those who have just tuned in, the recent episode that has happened in Stratham, just literally a few miles from where Reverend David lives in Clapham, in London. There has been an attack, of course, of the usual kind these days, unfortunately, in London, which is using a knife, starting to stab people, and then kind of pretending you have some kind of vest on. Fortunately, most of the time, these vests are false, fake. This time, apparently, it was a toaster. I don't know if that's true, but we have had this attack just happening a few hours ago, 3 hours to be exact, at 2 p.m. local time in England. So we are reporting on it. Now, let me introduce, of course, the Pew and our topic of the day. We have, of course, from London, Reverend David, our openly gay priest with an unusual view, but always great and of course very knowledgeable about things to do with theology. Then we have from Jerusalem, our mighty autist with a genius mind is Lowell, and then we have John Barwell from Detroit, the historian of American intelligence media himself, former manager of one of the most known esoteric bookshops in the United States, the Mayflower Bookshop in Detroit. So this is the Pew, and we are actually in the absence of Roseanne, who was supposed to be with us. She said, though, a couple of hours ago, she might even join us. We don't know. We have, though, read in the Daily Mail, she has communicated, of course, to us in private that she has the flu. We hope that this flu is not too related in any way to the coronavirus, but it seems to be a very strong strain of flu anyhow this year. We know that the coronavirus is expanding. We have had now over 300 dead. The number of contaminated individuals around the world is growing by the minute. And all this, of course, is happening in a day that today was dedicated in China mostly to weddings that have been called off. It's a very special day today, guys, because the 2nd of February 2020 sees the combination of the number 2, which is, of course, in the Jewish Kabbalah connected to Bet, home, and to Kef, crown. And it is a day in some way connected to Luke 17, 22, 23, and 24. So this is, of course, a very special day, but also a day that makes us wonder what is really happening in the world when a godless society like China has a virus like corona erupting from the midst of nowhere into the world. Let me ask, first of all, how is the coronavirus being discussed, received by the majority of the population in England with Reverend David William Perry? And then we're going to go, of course, with the same question also to Lowell in Jerusalem and John Barnwell in Detroit. So, David.
Well, the trouble with Britain is its history, as always, it's too long. So already everybody's panicking, although the Black Death, the Great Plague is arriving back. Not helped by the British media. If there's a good story, let's exaggerate it and frighten everybody to death. These are serious issues and we must be practical and we must deal with them in a medically responsible manner. But again, it's mass panic. Nobody's really thinking about what needs to be done on a medical level. If people are taking holidays when And apparently French airlines are letting all the people that are meant to be quarantined back into France and to Britain. So it's one of those ridiculous situations where it's every man and woman for themselves. And, you know, it's not the plague. It's not the plague. If we all deal with things sensibly, I'm sure the effects can be restrained and dealt with effectively, as I was saying, you know. But no, it's panic, Leo. It's panic, 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 panic. And that's what rules Great Britain at the moment.
Thank you, David, for your excellent report. Lowell, in Jerusalem, how they're taking the coronavirus? Have there been any cases down there? Have you interrupted your flights with China? I know that, of course, there is a lot of people in Israel that do business with China, and you have a big community of Jewish people in China. So, Lowell.
I wish I could be the bearer of good tidings. I wish I could tell people not to panic. Panic help. The research that, as far as what people think or know here in Israel after 28 years, I realize I don't have the faintest idea. Most people are busy with their daily affairs and Trump's proposal, and I'm not sure to what extent the folks out there are aware of anything. Now, I've been researching. Hi, Roseanne, and glad you're feeling better. Can I take a
I couldn't find the link again. Oh, my hair's a mess.
You know what that reminds me of? There's a wonderful, in that Indiana Jones movie, one of the Indiana Jones movie, the plane is starting to go out of control, and Indiana Jones with a young lady, they're trying to get to the exit, and she says, I think it's one of the greatest lines, my hair, my hair. The plane is crashing, but, you know, girls got to look la bella figura.
I don't know. I've been sick. I've been sick, and I've
take care of that in the green room.
Are we going off what? Okay. So anyway, it's so early here. It's like 7:30.
You are still in a way. So the Daily Mail is saying that you were supposed to go to this Mar-a-Lago party, but you, of course, were not present because of your flu. And as everybody can see, you're still sick. We hope that that soon you're going to recover. But is it a very strong strain of flu you are suffering, Roseanne?
Oh, there's a few strains out here in Hawaii. There's I don't think we got that the big Chinese one yet. We didn't get that one. Okay. But we've got a whole host of other ones that are not so fun either.
Okay, so we were actually asking how coronavirus is received in various communities. John, how is the situation in Detroit? We know that in Boston, in New York, in other, of course, in Southern California, we have had cases of the coronavirus erupting, mainly among Chinese coming back from Wuhan. How is the situation in Detroit, John?
Well, I haven't heard much of anything regarding cases in the area. Not that there aren't, it's just I haven't really tried to follow up on that. Over at American Intelligence Media, what we've been looking at is U.S. patent number 10130-701. That was the coronavirus patent that was issued in November 20th, 2018, and is held by the Purebright Institute, a UK company that the Queen owns the golden share. Now, that's an interesting concept, because what we have here is these manufactured agents that are coming out of these laboratories, and why anybody would want to go to the trouble to manufacture pathogens. Allegedly, with the excuse they give, of course, is, well, we have to do this because we have to figure out how to make more vaccines to protect ourselves. Well, you're making a vaccine to protect against something that never existed before you created it. So tell me the wisdom about that. But anyways, we have a great deal of research available for anybody who's interested on Americans for Innovation and American Intelligence Media. We've got the patent documents, the whole shot. And
so you are definitely, John, at American Intelligence Media, you are definitely viewing this as some kind of bacteriological weapon that
yeah, it snuck out the garage or something, crawled out the window. Who knows?
So who knows if it has been done voluntarily or has been done by accident?
No idea. I don't like to speculate, and there's so much out there that's so speculative.
Isn't there? It's like you can't even figure what's real anymore or what's just a joke.
And that's why
in
American Intelligence Media and Americans for Innovation, we post primary documentation. And
what does that mean for people who may not know?
Well, for example, like in our pieces regarding the senior executive service that most people have never even heard of,
right?
That are the civilian generals underneath the cabinet that are supposed to enact the wishes of the cabinet and the president, but of course, in their usual manner as bureaucrats, they go off and they do whatever they can to try and prevent things from unfolding. That's a big part of the trouble that President Trump has been having is through the senior executive service, the SES. And that's one level. And every 5 years, they publish what are called the plum books. We were able to locate the plum books, they're government documents. But then one of our researchers discovered was that they had been booby-trapped so that you couldn't do searches on them because they would do things like put take spaces out, just triggers in there so that you couldn't really work with them. So we had to debug all of the plum to be able to post them, but they're all posted at Americans for Innovation. And you can look up the whole cast of characters. And a lot of the criticism that we've made of people in recent memory has to do with the fact that they are members of the senior executive service, which is these official bureaucrats in Washingtonia that are really at the core of screwing things up. And they're run by a council of lawyers, of close to 500 lawyers, which is kind of an analogous organization to the Queen's Privy Council. And they feel it's their right to run the country. And if you look at the people that have been...
Isn't that what...
members?
John, sorry, isn't that what common people know nowadays as the deep state, the swarm?
I would call this the secret government. The deep state, I would call the corporate side of the equation. You know, when you get into like your pharmaceutical companies and you get into your aerospace companies like Boeing and I don't want to go down the whole list, but
of course,
it's those are the people. The permanent power brokers is really the deep state.
Now, today, I wanted to also break from all this and discuss in some way, though always linked to current events at times, the subject of being touched by the grace of God during our life.
Can we talk about the peace deal, Trump's peace plan?
Absolutely, and that is interesting because
to me that's the only news that's news.
Yes,
you know?
Yes, that is actually, Roseanne, Abu Mazen a few hours ago has said that he's gonna walk out of any kind of deal. Abu Mazen seems to don't want to have anything to do with it. So let's give our first intervention on this subject to Lowell, who is down in Israel, who can maybe tell us more what is happening. Lowell, what is happening really? Because Abu Mazen doesn't want to have anything to do with the whole thing. So it's already failed on start, this whole process.
I realize people think that because I'm physically located in Israel, somehow I know more what's going on here. I wish I could say that was true.
What are people saying there? What are the Israelis saying?
Well, maybe this and maybe that. I would like to say something later on about the coronavirus in light of last week's, this week's, and next week's Parsha that we're going through with the Exodus from Egypt and the plagues there. But I'll leave that for later. Also, I want to compliment the people in England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales on Brexit, which I was in favor of.
Me too.
And to congratulate Lionel Nation's wife, who's very involved in the issue of human trafficking, for her visit to Washington with Lionel and the conclusion of Human Trafficking Awareness Month, I think
Lynn
it was.
Shaw.
Where
Her name's Lynn Shaw.
President Trump, what?
Her name is Lynn Shaw.
Lynn Shaw. Lynn, congratulations. And President Trump has appointed a special commissioner to deal with the issue of human trafficking, which is critical because they got Al Capone on taxes. The way the deep states, I use that word as a short version of much longer one, are going to be taken down worldwide is on this. But we'll leave that for later. Now, you asked about the peace process. Number one, real peace between the children of Israel and the children of Ishmael in the land of Israel will be made tribe by tribe, clan by clan, and family by family.
That's right.
That's
You're
my
not going to
mantra.
come in there with you. I think relating it to America, you're not going to come in there with any Chicago talk. It's going to be done tribally, and that's what
it always could have been. It always could have been done that way.
That's right, but they wouldn't let women. They
1920s.
wouldn't let any grandmothers in the peace process, and that's why it's failed. That's number one. And I just think that needs to be told. Because grandmothers make peace in every country, in all of history. It is up to the grandmothers to do that, to speak to one another. And I just want to say, since the Roseanne show went off the air, when was it, 98, I decided to, give back. So I went all over the world. I just want people to know this is a big announcement, okay? I went all over the world and I prayed with Muslim grandmothers, Christian grandmothers, Buddhist grandmothers, Hindu grandmothers, Jewish grandmothers, Palestinian grandmothers, everything you can think of, African grandmothers of African religions. We have all prayed together. And I made that my goal of the last 20, what is this? This is 2020, so it's 22 years now. And we also danced. After we prayed, we all danced. And it was just like a reshaping of the world, the foundations of the world, because we were just having so much fun. We were expressing joy of being alive and being together and being free. And I think, Trump's peace plan, nobody understands it at all. It's got really odd things in it, but I don't know if they're bad or good. I think that when you have a peace plan,
which are these odd things, Roseanne, because we need to understand them together with our audience.
Well, I just want to say this first, that when Trump was speaking about it, he said one sentence that I liked. The rest I was like, I got to do a lot of research and catch up here, and who's what and who's where and who wrote this. And it's like the Iran deal. You need to know the author, I think. That's why I was so concerned with Valerie Jarrett, because she is the author of the Iran deal. But anyway, I wanted to know who, because I'm a writer, I guess, and I love to work with writers and fire them. And I know all the writers I fired in Hollywood, they went to work for the Democrats, and they have written this. It's true. Nobody believes me, but it's true. And, their writing is just, it doesn't reach people. And so why write, unless you're just a chronic masturbator, which they all are for the most part. But anyway, who wrote this peace deal? But this is one line that I liked, and then I'll talk about that. He said, they are negotiating. And I just loved that so much, because I realized, the Abu Mazen and them, they didn't say no immediately. This time, would they wait 3 days before they said they want to kill every Jew in the Middle East? That was, they showed some restraint there, because it was 3 days of nothing. And so I think what Trump you know, they would have to speak to each other, the PLO, Hamas, the Al-Fatah, all of them. They'd all have to speak to each other about what they were going to say besides kill the Jews. And so there were 3 days there, I think Trump was signaling to us, where they were actually negotiating with each other. And that breaks a stalemate because, you know, as I've said for a long time, the whole left that runs, you know, Abu Mazen, the leftists who run him, who own him, or are part of his narrative here in America, they had to, the biggest enemy of fascism is dialogue. And they were actually speaking to each other about, hey, should we let our people live or not? Should we let the grandmothers here and their grandchildren and their grown children, should we let them live and have rights or not? And it took them 3 days to say, no, we shouldn't. We should continue to use, you know, their children as child soldiers, which is against the UN, but the UN protects it for some reason. And, you know, it's just so corrupt that I don't know, only God can fix it. But I do believe that God will fix it and is in the process of fixing it, because dialogue, however brief, an open mind to speak to another human being, no matter how brief, is still an opening. And like Leonard Cohen says, you know, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So,
and that means touched by the grace of God in a way,
yeah.
which is also one of the
Well,
subjects.
we don't say it that way. That's more, you know, your corner of the neighborhood.
Of course, and David for the corner of the neighborhood. How the people of Great Britain are reacting to this peace deal proposal from President Trump and Netanyahu?
So exciting. I don't know. What are they saying? Lowell, have you heard anything about it?
I don't know, but I think David should know. As
David,
in Great Britain.
Yeah.
David, aside from Brexit, which I think is the main subject of the day in Great Britain, have they talked in any way about this peace deal? Because, I mean, Great Britain has a great responsibility towards the people of Israel and Palestine.
I mean, I've got to be honest. I mean, most of the conversations have been about Brexit and the coronavirus.
Yeah.
You know, there's been some comment on the Trump peace deal. It's guardedly optimistic, I notice. You know, I don't know what's wrong with half the British media. You know, the man can't do anything good at all, which is ridiculous. But I notice it's been very guarded, and that might simply be where all the airtime has been devoted to Brexit. I mean, it's been a seismic shift of unparalleled proportions, which no one was really expecting.
Right.
No, it's that and paranoia over the coronavirus. I mean, there was one woman on the tube, the metro, next to me yesterday who had a seasonal sneeze, and she was nearly lynched by fellow passengers. I mean, you know, so we've got to keep a steady head. I know Lowell is very, very knowledgeable on these things, and I'm not saying it's not a serious situation. It is, but the public paranoia, I think, curiously, is related to Brexit, because nobody feels safe and secure about anything at the minute. And so, as I say, there's been some
pretty jubilant on TV.
Nearly everybody's been on TV, Roseanne. So, you know, giving their 5 minutes of fame and an opinion. You know,
people in the street celebrating all over TV, all over the internet. They were cheering. They were setting off fireworks. You know, I mean, the British people are happier than hell.
Oh yeah, I mean, there were fireworks.
Walk out. There were fireworks. You.
I mean, there were fireworks at the end of my street. I mean, you know, it's.
Oh.
But you know, we can't underestimate the sense of genuine confusion and anxiety that arose at 11 p.m. the other night. I'm the whole Brexit thing, I confess. I'm an old libertarian. Liberty wasn't mentioned by any of the war living in Brussels or they're in seats in Westminster. Liberty seems to be the lowest thing down the list with this particular type of separation, and there's nothing new. Under Henry VIII, we had a Brexit then, nothing new. I mean, there was a single currency in those days.
The problem here seems to be, I mean, I'm half British, of course, I lived many years in England. I think the main problem now is with Scotland and with Northern Ireland, and with the fact that there is some difficulty now in keeping together the unity of the United Kingdom. The moment
unity.
There is Scotland, unfortunately, which is on a completely different path. I don't know why, but they seem to want to stay in that hell zone, which is Europe. And me and maybe David differ from that point of view. I have lived in Europe since I was a little child. I saw my mother, a citizen of the UK, marrying with my father, Italian. I remember still when the Italian police, even 5 years after they were had me, they will come to the door and they will say, oh, she's not still a resident of Italy and she doesn't have the rights and whatever. And then, of course, things changed because Italy and the UK were both part of Europe. The UK started to integrate. And of course, at that point, it became one big zone, one big area. But then the problems also arose in the 90s. I started to see that Europe was starting to become a future hell zone ruled by Germany and France and by their dirty interests. So I wanted to get myself out of Europe. I tried to apply for citizenship in Norway, which is still out of the EU, and I wanted to be out of the EU. Actually, I could have applied for UK citizenship, having lived there for many years and also being also half British, but I didn't because it seemed irreversible, the whole thing. So it was like the UK was doomed to be part of this whole EU process. Now, Nigel Farage, you can like him, you can dislike him. He started this process. It actually got a referendum. People decided to go out of Europe. And I personally would love Italy to do the same because I think that Italy is having some very big problems. I mean, here we are talking about countries in Southern Europe like Greece and Spain or other countries that are selling out their everything to Germany, who has even bought the airports in Greece. And people, but I mean, the problem is if Greece and the Greek people don't have the dignity to rebel, because at this point you have to rebel. But to rebel means getting Eugenfor, which is the European police force that arrives with tanks full of Germans in your own country, because at that point you are part still of this EU. Now, in 2013, David, Roseanne, and everybody from the panel, I became part of the Pitchforks revolution against the EU. I was persecuted by the police. They slammed into the door of my house. They broke down the door. They locked me up. And it took me 2 weeks to get out of there. And I was, of course, persecuted by these people politically. They didn't want me on TV anymore. They said to the journalist order, because in Italy is an order of journalists, to not have me on any radio TV show in the country from there on, because I had become a problem. My anti-European stand had become a problem because they are afraid of somebody who has lived Europe like me. I mean, I took my first plane when I was probably 4 months old to go to England and visit my relatives. I'm a European in the sense that I am 6% Spanish, I am 25% English, Irish, I am French, German, and Italian. Of course, all this is a mix, and I liked the idea of Europe. But this federal Europe, this way Europe is being conducted by a bunch of bureaucrats with no sense of really, I mean, it becomes very robotic when you get to Brussels and you go in front of these bureaucrats from Northern Europe and they watch Italians, because of course I look more Italian than I look Northern European, though I'm actually more Northern European than I'm Italian in my DNA. But the thing is, when I go to Brussels and I'm in front of these bureaucrats that look you down and they are like this. Even in Freemasonry, even in the lodges of Freemasonry, they look down at Italians like, oh, you little Italians, you from the P2, we don't want you in our lodges here in Northern Europe, in the Swedish, or in the, they're all very like this. So to be treated in that way, and I have lived many years also in Scandinavia, I have lived many years around Europe, in every single place in Europe. I know Europe like I know my pockets. And I can tell you that Europe is profoundly wrong. And the problem for Italy will be they will not be able to get out without a civil war. So I went away from Italy, and I'm saying to the Italians, I don't want to have anything to do with your politics. The only solution is to seal the borders and start a war. Because they are, look what they're doing in France. Look what they're doing in France. I mean, in France, we have a situation which is terrible. And John, David, Lowell, Roseanne, you have all seen the last week in France, a fireman fighting against policemen, being beaten up violently in the streets. Is that right? What do you think, David, about that? Because, I mean, it's like beating up firemen.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm no friend of this type of Europe. I mean, it was a bullseye, Leo. It's bureaucratic. It's run by rich kids trying to tell everybody what to do. You know, and Brussels Brussels was becoming unaccountable. I mean, you know, what our generation voted for, you know, joining the economic union was not what we were living in.
Yeah.
And it was increasingly moving. And I hope it's not, you know, intemperate of me to say we actually were moving towards a fascist superstate. I agree. You know, nobody was being consulted about a European army. No one was being consulted about a European police force. No one was being consulted about sovereignty. No one was being consulted about migration. And, you know, and it goes on and on and on.
Well, that makes me think of something. Lowell, remind me so I don't forget. Okay, continue. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, so I think people have got my position wrong. You know, the libertarian in me is cautiously optimistic, but I couldn't help noticing what was missing from the narrative. Liberty as an idea was missing on every side of the narrative. Yeah. It was all about the consolidation of power and the consolidation of economics. And, you know, okay, Uncle Boris, can we please remember what started this process in the first place? What is going to happen if we're not careful? Liberty for Wales. We want complete independence. What is going to happen if we're not careful is the Scottish are now going to seek their own referendum, despite the fact they've got regional government, because over half of them, if the polls are to be believed, now want to be crypto-Europeans no matter what. That is flabbergasting. Northern Ireland will be the tipping point. The more impetus there is towards freedom, whatever that might mean in the Scottish context, will actually affect Northern Ireland. And this time it will try, I think, to become part of the Republic. And if we're not careful, we all end up as a group of very minor states with no permanent seat on the Security Council and very little influence. There was one, I actually know the guy, so I can't give names. There was one Tory member of Parliament recently that was caught saying at a number of dinner parties, do we actually need Scotland? You know, so, you know, we've got to be careful about our enthusiasm for this type of Brexit. The Europe we were all living under was monstrous, tyrannical, and it was getting worse by the month. Yeah, I agree with absolutely everybody, all the critics, and probably everyone on this panel. I'm cautious about the type of Brexit we've had and the sort of independence we're beginning to discuss, because it's already looking, from my perspective, at a sort of regionalism which isn't healthy for anybody. At the risk of getting into serious trouble, my fellow libertarians...
I like regionalism.
Well, yeah, but you know, there are ways of introducing it and there are ways of introducing it, Roseanne. You know, I mean, most in the party, they're all talking about the Swiss system with all the different cantons. What a wonderful idea that would be. But how do we move from where we are into that which nobody wants to talk about? So as I
we've got to talk about it first.
Yeah, but that right, bullseye with you, because
I thought the person who really caused Brexit, the person who tipped the balance was Pat Condell, and I really thank him for his video that he put out on the night before the election, where he explained it so incredibly beautifully and succinctly.
Yeah.
He the English, they love to hear themselves talk. No offense.
Well, I'm well, of course.
But they do, and he put it succinctly, and he said, "Go and vote." He laid it out. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said, "Go." Just those of you, and I'm saying it to America too. Those of you who do not vote are the ones who will decide the future of our country. So I would ask you to just give voting a try, just this one time, and vote for Trump. And if you register as a Democrat, you'll be able to vote for Trump 5 or 6 times.
Look, all I'll say with the Brexit thing is I'm cautiously and quietly optimistic. Let's hope that British spirit of independence.
You're overlooking Trump. You're overlooking Trump. You're not bringing the Trump factor. And with that, I think we have to talk about God when we talk about that. But can we just can Lowell and I just talk about the deal for 1 minute?
Yeah,
what?
Deal, the peace deal.
Yes,
Listen,
actually,
I heard that control of
there's an echo.
Yes, there is a slight echo, guys.
It's probably my annoying voice. Everyone's annoyed at my voice.
So please, Roseanne and Lowell, on the subject of...
No, but it said that control of the Temple Mount will shift from the Hashemites in Jordan, the Hashemite family, the king of Jordan, who has controlled the Temple Mount from the beginning of Israel as a state. That control of the Temple Mount will go instead to Saudi Arabia.
To Saudi Arabia.
Which that's a huge geopolitical shift, right? I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I have several comments, but I also hear myself speaking after I speak.
Okay.
We actually hear you.
Who's not talking has to mute, or we're going to get an echo. We don't know who's causing it, so if everybody mutes, if they're not talking, we'll get rid of the echo.
I muted. Was I supposed to talk? I muted. Wait, I unmuted it. Am I supposed to talk now? Oh, okay, because now I see, Marcel Marceau with pantomime. I can't hear you. Several points going back to what you mentioned. I tried to summarize several things relating to, okay, that was the problem. Now I understand. Yeah, I see the mute button, stop, cam, mic, share screen, leave student. Good. Several points related to the so-called peace deal and then Brexit. Number one, this is something I will keep mentioning over and over again, such as my mantra that real peace has to be made between the children of Israel and the children of Ishmael, tribe by tribe, clan by clan, family for family. But there's another point that gets left out. The Palestine Authority is not real. It's a money laundering operation. It doesn't represent those clans, tribes, and families. I know that because I talked to. It's not supposed to. It never was supposed to. Just like Hashim and Husseini was brought in by the bad guys in the 1920s so he could kill off thousands of Arabs who wanted to welcome Jews in Israel, and they could have worked it out. The powers that be in England, in those occult societies, linked to the Sabbateans, the Frankists, etc., did not want things worked out. And then when he was gone after World War II, Then later on in was brought Abdul Rauf al-Khodbi al-Husseini, the Egyptian from Alexandria, euphemistically known as Arafat. Arafat's a mountain near Mecca, mentioned in the second surah of the Quran, Al-Baqarah, the cow, that as you approach the holy city, stop at the special mountain, it's called Arafat, and you do something, certain prayers there. He wasn't real. Now he's gone. Mahmoud Abbas is nicknamed by Arabs the Jewish Agency because he's of Jewish origin, as is Saeed Barakat and half the rest of their council. Aside from the fact that whether they're Jews or half Jews or Arabs, they're Arabs from Tunis who the local Arabs said, what do you bring these people in for? Why don't you talk to us? Because it's not about talking to them, it's about follow the money. This is about international crime. These are international crime syndicates, the same way like with Ukraine and Burisma. Follow the money. So when we hear that Mahmoud Abbas, the Jewish Agency, rejected the deal, he doesn't represent anyone but himself. Now, all the Arabs in the various tribes, clans, and families here know that. But the West doesn't know and doesn't want to know because the crime families in England, Europe, and the United States are quite happy doing business with the crime syndicate here, which is the Palestine Authority, because it's about money and money laundering. Right, so let's get that out of the way. So there's no peace partner because it doesn't exist. Also because there's no Palestinian people. How do I know? Because I talk to Arabs. That's just for Western consumption. It's not real. Now I have to mute my mic. Wait a second.
Okay.
Roseanne, I muted my mic.
I will give. Okay,
Yeah.
so who is it? Is it
Tribal
Roseanne?
rights are being decimated throughout the entire Middle East, and like they have been in America and Africa and every other place that has them. And without those treaties, you don't just come in, you don't just come in there and call yourself a huge corporate entity of the world and override all tribal rights and all tribal people's rights, and then institute this corporate fascist war machine thing. It's not going to work there because those people, all of them, are actual believers. It's not just a pose they take. They're actual believers. And I think the goal is to destroy all tribal people along with their rights too. But at some point, the corporatocracy is going to have to listen to the people if it wants to survive or be changed. And it is going to change because the people don't like it. And, when you disenfranchise the people from their own vote, that's just beyond crazy and can't be fixed.
Okay, we are back. We are back on
Yes,
this
Leo.
microphone of mine. I wanted to ask John regarding the fact that, of course, he often points out on the Pilgrim Society, and pilgrims naturally go to the Holy Land, So there is always been this link with the Holy Land, if not also symbolically. But there is a lot of responsibility when it comes down to Abu Mazen, also with the English crown and with what they have done for years behind the scenes with MI6, the Islamic Brotherhood, and all that.
Yeah, I mean, oh, you got to mute. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, once you get to the bottom of this and you see how it leads back to the chicanery of the British Empire back during the Imperial Age, right? And you have the Sykes-Picot Agreement. That was the agreement, a secret agreement, by the way, about what to do with the Levant, okay, after seeing the way things were developing. So you go to World War I and you have all these powers fighting against each other, and you have the Ottoman Empire crumbling into pieces, and you see the British cutting deals with different people and promising them things, okay? And then at the end of the war, then they went down their checklist and they said, well, sorry, we made that promise, but we can't keep it. And they betrayed this tribal community en masse. I mean, it was just absolutely unbelievable what they did. And they assigned certain powers and assigned certain regents. And it was basically a juggling act between Britain and France, but there was also other European powers in the mix. I would recommend, there's a video put out by this world history documentary called Timeline, and it's Promises and Betrayals, Britain and the Holy Land. And it really kind of lays out the groundwork of and it has wonderful actual footage, and it's just really well done. But you have to understand that first before you can even begin to have a conversation. Once you understand how the Sykes-Picot secret agreement screwed the Israelis, screwed the Arabs, screwed the Turks, screwed everybody except for the Brits and the French, basically, okay? Then you can start looking beneath this and get into some of the deeper levels of it. Now, I remember back during the Egypt-Israel war, you know, I was friends with the Max Fisher and his wife Marjorie, and I used to hear these wonderful stories about this because he was picked by the Israelis to be a mediator between Egypt and Israel, okay? And she told a story. She was at a dinner that they were having, and she walks up to Sadat and Begin, who were standing there talking, puts her arms around both their shoulders and says, now, come on now, guys, you know this is just a family thing. I mean, she was great, right? And so there's that backdrop. And what Roseanne is saying about the grandmothers is so true. I remember David Spangler telling a story to us, and it's very interesting. It's about the Indian nations and how they would meet, and they would all meet in a circle, and one tribe would set to the side and they would tend the fire, and they didn't say anything, and then they would have a conversation about what they wanted to do, and then they would take what they came up with. These are all men. They would take it to the grandmothers, and the grandmothers would either say yes or no, and if they said no, they had to go back and do it all over again, talk about all the different things, and then take it back to the grandmothers. And I think that there's a true wisdom in that. And it is something lacking. And by grandmothers, I don't mean Nancy Pelosi, for God's sake. She's a poor example. But there's a certain wisdom, like what Marjorie showed there, which is essentially the case, that yes, this is a family thing, but yes, the struggles between the Hashemites and the House of Saud. I mean, come on, the House of Saud, they were like raiders. They raided like caravans. That's what they came from, you know. And besides, if you get into the actual history of Islam and you start studying the satellite imagery that they're working with now, they know the geographical location of Mecca. Yes, the geographical location of Mecca is in Jordan. It's not in Saudi Arabia, okay? And I challenge anybody to go and look at it. When they pray in the earliest mosques, that they're pointed towards where you're supposed to pray. And if you draw a line from all the very earliest mosques, they all crisscross right in Jordan. They don't go to Saudi Arabia at all. And if you go to the descriptions in the Quran, it's not a description of Saudi Arabia. There's no early record archaeologically. So it's something that was created, that was something that was a ploy of the Sunni Arabs to grab the status of the sacred site. And okay. And so consequently, there's a lot on the table that has to be figured out. And most people, unfortunately, know very little, especially about the things I've just shared.
Thank you.
I was actually checking out. Thank you, John, for your excellent resume. And I was actually checking on the titles while Roseanne was showing them. So I was like going into my computer to.
This one is so amazing, and it's the author is it's too long of a story, but anyway, the Iroquois people are the people that Benjamin Franklin based the United States of America on. They had a grandmother's council, and it was they did, of course, we all have our prayer circles, our inclusive prayer time and place. I hate using those corrupted words, but you have to sometimes. But their grandmother's council was much like Lowell, very much, in fact, almost identical to the court of the women that was in the temple. In our Hebraic, Judaic temple, we had a court of women where all of the community's problems were solved, kind of like a small claims court. And the case was brought, and it was, discussed in an open circle of people who knew how to communicate with each other because they had shared values. All these things are very tribal, and they're very much what's under attack in the real world of corporatocracy. They don't like any of these philosophies. They only like the one world religion and one world thing, which means 3 people at the top and 800 trillion people at the bottom. And I just, whatever they call it and dress it up, and they do things to keep people in it. And we all know, if everybody who has any cult or religious cult experience knows the truth of how things work, and they just want to impose that on all the grandmothers. So I guess we'll shut up, and so we don't have the power to say what I'm going to say right now is, you guys, you got to knock this shit off. Come on, really? This is the best you can do? Listen, I have a plan, and I'll lay it out, because nobody ever lays out the plan. That's why authorship is so important in every deal. Who is the author of the deal? And, it's never the people who pay the ultimate price in the loss of their children and their lives and being raped. I mean, it's never inclusive of women or children. And now it's not even inclusive of males or men. It doesn't even include them. It only includes a few at the expense of the many. And that is just, we're too smart now. We're just too smart now.
And there is, of course, a lot of criticism towards the one world religion, and we understand that because it's a little bit like the one world government. You are basically destroying the singularity of the people, their customs, their traditions, in favor of something which is a potpourri, a mix of everything that in the end will just give you a 7-Eleven at each corner and a McDonald's and whatever. Even in the religious contest, this is what they want to do. So definitely we want to make this clear for our viewers, that we are not supporting in any way a one world religion scam, especially the one that is coming together thanks to the Jesuits. Please, Roseanne.
But I agree with everything you just said. Thank you. It's very well put. Very nice. But there already is a one world religion. People just don't know it yet. But I think soon they are going to know it. And the people we are kind of fighting against its antithesis, because there's people who don't want us to feel any connection to our own personal interpretation of God. They want to impose theirs on us, and that destroys our spirituality. So that's a bore. I want to read something. Can I read something somebody sent me today? There is a one world religion. There is one religion in charge of our world, and they like numbers. They run on everything is numbers. Okay, I'm just going to read this because I wanted to say something about Kobe Bryant and all that, and I was talking to people online about it, and someone sent me this. I thought it was interesting. Can you see me? Okay, well today is 02/02/2020. And it is
something you actually pointed out at the beginning of the show.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was late. I was looking for my stuff. This is the first time in over 900 years since 11/11/11/11. The date is palindromic, no matter the date format. It is also the 33rd day of the year with 333 days left. Did you know that? Listen to this. Kobe Bryant is dead at 41. His daughter dead at 13. 41 is the 13th prime number. (13 plus 41 equals 54. Super Bowl 54 is next week, Sunday, February 2nd, which is the 33rd day of the year, which is a very powerful number of, the people who run everything. Kobe Bryant is 41 in numerology. The date numerology of the crash is 1/26 plus 20 equals 47. The helicopter officially crashed at 9:47 a.m. The Lakers founded in 1947. Kobe's jersey is number 24. LeBron James' jersey is number 23. 24 plus 23 equals 47. America founded by Freemasons on the 4th of July. All professional sports were founded and credited to the Freemasons, who just so happened to be obsessed with numbers, numerology, rituals, and gematria, especially the number 47. Another undeniable piece of evidence proving all mainstream media events are staged and scripted using the number code of gematria A to Z equals 1 to 26. Add A equals 1 up to Z equals 26. Add up a letter in a word to find out the sum of that word and words. Then there's stuff about he and his daughter, but I just don't feel right about reading that. But his death, but it is interesting that Gianna Bryant equals 1, and she died on 1/26. LeBron passed Kobe in scoring with a total score of 126 points in Philadelphia, which is Kobe's home city. His death just happens to be on the day of the Grammys at the Staples Center, home to the LA Lakers and Kobe. Wow, Kobe was number 24 and Gigi was number 2. And the day was the 26th. Wow, 24 plus 2 equals 26. Rest in peace. Who knows if it's just coincidence. It's just, I love numbers. And, I just love numbers and math, and they do too. But I want to say that is not Hebrew. That is not kosher gematria. I just want to say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to kosher, I think for a more kosher approach, we should discuss the fact that we have the letter, of course, bet, which is connected to the number 2. and then we have, of course, the letter Kef, the crown, connected to the number 20. I would also like to say that this day comes in a period of time that for Jewish tradition is 40 days of impurity after that you have after the birth, and of course here we are approaching that also with after the birth of Jesus, which is symbolically placed on the 25th. I also wanted to read a passage that I think is connected in some way today to this specific day that we are living, which is not going to happen in our lifetime again, to Luke 17, 22, 24. Then he said to his disciples, the time is coming when you will long to see one of the days of the Son of Man, but you will not see it. People will tell you, there he is, or here he is. Do not go running off after them, for the Son of Man in his day will be like the lightning, will flashes and lights up from the sky from one end to the other. So this just to give you a Christian take on the whole thing. Father David, if you want to add something to it.
Gosh, I'd like to talk about two. I'm authoring at the minute an article on Papa Doc for international relations. You know, I sort of knew a little about Pierre Duvalier. I knew a little more about Jean-Claude Duvalier, baby Doc, his son. I'd forgotten. Let me just be roundabout for a minute, Leo. You know, I claimed to be Welsh a minute ago. It was a homage to you because I'm obviously British. I don't know English as well. I don't know if that makes me proud of my own voice. I'm a bit Italian. I'm a bit German. That's the essence of being European, isn't it? We're all a bit of each other, and that's why it can work out in the end. The Power of Two. Papa Doc was a highly initiated Voodoo priest. The Tom Lecoute, his secret police, were also initiates in the black versions of Voodoo. What I'd forgotten, two things. He used to ride, everyone was terrified of Papa Doc. What he managed to do was take people back to childhood, the whole island. They were so terrified of him that he reduced their mental age to that of children. He used to ride in his limo with the number plates 2222, and people were terrified because that can mean all sorts of things. We've got to be careful. Gamma is very complicated. I know there are people on this panel that know much more about it than me, but there's a dark side to it as well, which we mustn't forget, sadly. You know, Jean-Claude Duvalier, Pierre Duvalier, I'd forgotten this bit as well. When the Tom Lecoute, of course, they used to sometimes kidnap people, normally grandmothers, off the street for no reason at all. To them, Papa Doc would have peepholes in most of the torture chambers so he could see what was happening. And sometimes when they wouldn't admit they were in the wrong, how could they admit they were in the wrong? They'd done nothing. The Tom Lecoute would apply sulfuric acid to make sure they gave in. And you know, Duvalier would go into the torture chamber and tell them they were wrong to their faces as all this was going on. I'd forgotten the depravity of human nature when it gets going. As I say, this article's bringing it back to me. Two. We've got to be careful of false Christs. My reading of that passage is not to give divine authority to that which doesn't really deserve it. I got caught up in the Brexit row during the week. And isn't ideology a wonderful thing? Ideology's lots of fun. Everybody's got a different ideology, but it's not religion. It's an ersatz religion. And if it gets out of its place, if we start thinking fascism is Christ, communism is Christ, if we start thinking Brexit is Christ, if we start thinking Boris Johnson is Christ, and is what that passage is telling us. You know, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, but keep for God that which is God's. Ideology is lots of fun, and we all live in the same world, and we've got to work out our differences. But when it goes wrong, you end up with Pierre de Villiers, where any type of diversity is against the law. And if you don't conform, the secret police arrest you and torture you until you agree you're in the wrong, and then they kill you. You know, vive the grandmothers, vive the diversity. Let's try and find all of our tribal roots again. But we will only do that when we're no longer mistaking ideology for theology, which happens too much in our present world. So that's my reading of that passage, Leo. I'll go back into mute.
John now. Bravo.
Yeah,
also for Father Dave. John, I wanted to ask you, you have an excellent book which is divided on the major arcana of the Tarot. So you are knowledgeable about these numbers and what they signify. Can you give us your take in the light, of course, of your publication that you can also talk about with our viewers?
Okay. If you mute, yeah. See, the way I look at it is perhaps different from some people, because it's something I've concerned myself with for more than 45 years or so, you know, and studying Gematria and Kabbalah. And it's an aspect, the attribute of this Gematria is an attribute of the Shekinah, of God's presence in the world, okay? And really in the Kabbalistic understanding, the more you adhere to those things which will align you with God, the more synchronistic the world becomes, because you're participating in that divine ordering. And so consequently, we used to sit around and play cards. Uno, actually, it's like a kid's game, you know? And we had I have a copy over here, but there's this book by astrology book, and it's all number coded. So there's hundreds of classifications in it. We'd sit there, we'd have conversations, and then somebody would say a number. And we'd look in the book, and it would describe what we were talking about. Now, and it always happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so not to beat around the bush, but the kind of synchronicities that you're talking about are a part of the universe in which we live. And it's not, people want to make it like it's been inserted by the secret cabal that are doing things according to numbers. Well, yeah, they may do that, but trust me, the numbering will work out even if they don't decide to do that. They will be exposed through the order of the universe itself. It goes back to a concept I've mentioned before in the tradition of the Kabbalah, where God tells Adam to give names to all the animals, and he always got it right. And it's that whole idea that the word is concealed in the universe. The universe is a manifestation of the word of God, Bereshith, right? In the beginning was the word was with God, and the word was a God. It's at the basis of all the Abrahamic religion, and it's at the basis of Hinduism. The sacred speech is Vak, that's the goddess, right? I mean, I could go on and on. There's a universality here to the whole concept of speech. And, you know, people today like to think in scientific terms, so they go, oh, okay, well, it's vibration, as if we live in this uninhabited universe and we're the only beings that live here, which is like the most ridiculous concept in the world, that we evolved out of some kind of swamp fart. You know? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be irreverent, but I guess it's okay against people who think in swamp farts. But they think that thoughts are extruded by the brain in the way that a gas exudes from a swamp. And it's, for anybody who's left their body consciously, you knows that the body's an apparatus. It's a filter. It's not an originator, although it can originate some people's thinking, because they are full of it. But if you don't have any humor, you're lost.
Now, there is also synchronicity, a subject that Carl Gustav Jung liked to play a lot with. And synchronicity was also the subject he discussed with this great physicist, Wolfgang Pauli, and they discussed it for years, because nothing is a coincidence. Everything has a meaning in this universe. Of course, there is also the butterfly effect, if we want to go like this. It's definitely not a coincidence that we are here today and in this particular day giving our view, which is a view which wants to be interesting, intellectually challenging, but also without any pretense. We are here in front of you guys, and we don't want to put ourselves on a pedestal. Some people said, the pew wants to put themselves on a pedestal. No, we don't want to put ourselves on a pedestal. We just want to challenge people with things that are not normally discussed, and we want to do it for those ears who are willing to listen to us, who are willing to give us their time. We might not be many at the moment that have this urge, but maybe in the future there will be many more that will jump on board, and we hope so, because we need a world that gravitates on less trivial. Please, Roseanne.
That's why I was holding that up, from subjugation to cooperation. This is a Svirot switch, John. We are moving from subjugation to cooperation. We're going to invent an entire new way of working the world that works for people, not for the few at the expense of the many. That's where we're at mentally and spiritually right now. And that's why it's so exciting to be alive right now, to see people will be able to change their minds. That's the most important thing, that people will be able to change their heart, their mind.
The basic within the tradition that I don't want to say follow, but Rudolf Steiner had indicated about the beginning of the Michaelic age. Okay, and he talked about that there's a system of archangelic ages that's part of the content of my books, and we're currently in the age of Michael, which is the age of freedom. Okay, that it's the destiny of mankind to move from the previous age, which is the age of the Archangel Gabriel, which is all about ancestral tribes and bloodlines and all that kind of stuff, which is all well and good. But to make that the centerpiece of current culture is to be going back to old forms. Okay, so we have to be able to develop into something that can contextualize this idea of the tribes and the peoples and all that, without going into this definitive nationalism that is in opposition to other tribes, cultures, and nations. Getting back kind of to the Cyrus concept, and also the concept of Alexander the Great. He thought these people should be able to be these people and come under the inspiration of their particular folk soul, which the folk souls are considered to be archangelic beings of language. And so consequently, being able to have a form that can allow these things to exist. And that's essentially the concept that's in the backstory of the Constitutional Republic of the United States. Not that these guys were planning to do that, but that it's a system that allows that to take place. Because it's not the United States the way they frame it today. It's these United States. It's that they are separate entities that have powers. It's the states that have the powers. The federal government has not been assigned any power other than the power that is assigned to it by the states. Rights, people have rights. The state doesn't have rights. Corporations don't have rights. Corporations are not people, but they're making corporations people so that they can utilize that aspect of the Constitution to be able to accomplish certain things. But corporations don't die. But see, in Thomas Jefferson's day, corporations were thought of as entities that were created to, say, solve a problem. Like, let's build a bridge. Okay, we'll create a corporation. Once you're done building the bridge, you dissolve the corporation. But see, they keep changing everything. It's all about the lawyers or the scribes and the Pharisees. They're always the devil is in the details. And so when you get to these bureaucrats, it goes back to the very beginning of our conversation with the Senior Executive Service. The EU is just a blown up version of the Senior Executive Service. A bunch of unelected bureaucrats that are going to sit down and put us under a government of rules and regulations. It's not laws. It's not laws are created by lawmakers that are elected by the people as an aspect of representative government.
That's right.
Bureaucrats are guys that you've never met that are up there writing rules and regulations that are control you, so you can't go fish. You can't go fish your house.
That is what has destroyed the EU, John.
Yeah.
The unelected bureaucrats standing in Brussels.
The Norwegians were in there fishing because the EU said they could. You know, so it's like it's that kind of BS bureaucratic situation that has the potential to really destroy human culture. You know, and that's what's going on. And so the Brexit has to do with getting away from this bureaucratic nonsense. But see, the Brits have their own nest of problems because they have the Privy Council, and your average Brit thinks that the Queen is just a titulary thing, and she doesn't have any power. Yeah, well, what are those cars driving up to her house early in the morning with those red boxes full of documents that are from committees, secret committees of Parliament, and she only knows who's in the committees, right? Nobody else can know. And she is dealing with all of this. I'm sorry, but yeah, the Britain has a long way to go because they never quite jumped on board the constitutional republic bandwagon. So I don't know. I can't solve their problems. I'm too busy trying to solve the problems in the United States. But one of our biggest problems is the Privy Council in the UK. They've caused more grief and aggravation than anybody on earth.
And they do it everywhere too. Everywhere, particularly in the Middle East. But I wanted to
Absolutely.
say,
But I love the British people.
The Iroquois that our nation was founded on, that was the model. They would sit and it would all be based on negotiation and discussion, and intelligence, communicating intelligence to each other rather than just mouthing narrative that some secret group gives them to, they were not. America is supposed to be like that, where we come together to solve the problems that plague our children. But that's all been hijacked, and now it works so crazy to the other side. We are complicit in laws that take our children from us. So it is so evil. It is so evil that it has to go. And if you're doing anything to support it at all, that's not good for your karma. You have to step away and stop holding it up. Stop supporting it. Step away and just let it fall. All you have to do is nothing and say nothing, because it's already happening.
I think one of our viewers said it.
I think we're witness it. So I think that's the bravest thing we can do, and the highest use we can be for each other is to just witness it and talk about what's actually happening. Because all these things from the past, I mean, they contributed to the problems, but there are people in control of our world who own every penny. And that's why they're in control of the world. And so what are we going to do about it? We have to start talking to each other about how we're going to transform it, starting with ourselves. Don't be complicit. That's number one. Don't be complicit.
So like one of our viewers wrote here on the comment board, nothing should be really privy, nothing should be kept really secret in this new world of ours. We are going towards the end of the show, and of course I want to give the usual space for shameless promotion of your books to all of you, and starting with Reverend David William Perry, who has an excellent book on Swedenborg. Then we have, of course, John already ready, piling up his books. Roseanne is running off to pick up hers, and Lowell, of course, has also a very interesting book on his own analysis of the Quran. So let's start with Reverend David and his latest book.
Gosh, I've got to keep a copy by me. I forget this bit of the show. It is called Mount Athos Inside Me, Essays on Religion, Swedenborg and Arts. And I'm trying to look at the interior side of religiosity. Religion is far too often the dead tomb surrounding spirituality.
No.
And I agree with Roseanne. You know, certain words are so tarnished nowadays, but they really aren't equivalent replacements, at least yet. So I'm trying to revive a type of theological vocabulary, look at mystical and spiritual experiences. I'm looking at a place of unique cultural achievements in Europe and discussing all of the arts that have been inspired by a genuinely holy place. And of course, it's not an island, it's actually a peninsula in Greece. You know, so it covers the best of all possible worlds. Go and buy one, or your grandchildren will hate you forever.
Please, John. Unmute your mic, John. Unmute your mic. Unmute your mic. Otherwise, we're still left in the 1920s with muted field.
The beginning was the silence. Yeah, here's my second book, The Arcana of Light on the Path, and my first book, The Arcana of the Grail Angel. And they're both available on eBay. We put links beneath the video here on YouTube. So if you want to find any of our books. I also have PayPal /.me /John Barnwell for anybody that just wants to journey here. And it's your mic, Leo.
Yes. I just went through the usual connection problems. Yes, we are here. We need a donation, and of course that's a good thing if you can donate. Also push on the donate button here, because the Leo Lion Zagami channel can keep on going only with your help. And of course, I have my own book here, which is the latest one, American Renaissance 2.0 and the Missing Link from the Invisible World. And of course, we start with a chapter dedicated to the archons and their grip on humanity, what Gurdjieff used to call the Schwarnorno, quite impossible thing to pronounce. That's how we pronounce it. And then we go into the language of the apocalypse, Coronzon and the Four Elements, Aleister Crowley, Apocalypse Superstar, and then we descend into the abyss of the Jesuit world and many other things. So that is my take on things for my latest book. Please, Roseanne, what is your book this week that you would like to push?
Well, I just want everyone to read this book and buy it. It's on Amazon, Transformation of America. This is my friend Kathy O'Brien's what happened after she read her experience as a trafficked sex slave, MK Ultra sex slave, into the Congressional Record, what happened to her life after. It's it tells you everything. Trance, as in narratives, you know. But anyway, here's my book, and my book is so good, and everyone should go get it. It's on Amazon. And this is a book about my real life and how I had, when I was a little girl, my imaginary friend, everybody has an imaginary friend, but my imaginary friend was God. It really was. That was my pal. And, this is a book about that, and also about healing from dissociative identity disorder with God's help.
Great.
With God's help.
Thank you so much, Roseanne, for plugging in the unusual and less known side of Roseanne, which you can find in her books. And Lowell, of course, you have also a book which is really in the name of interreligiosity, also in the name of understanding somebody else's culture, especially when it comes down to Islam. No, Lowell?
Okay, I've unmuted my mic. And I'm going to take this opportunity. There are three friends with me in the studio I'd like to introduce who are here to celebrate Brexit. This is Bagpipes Billy. That's William Barr, our Attorney General, who loves to play the bagpipes and is very proud of being a William Pelham Barr. If one saw Nigel Farage's last speech at the European Union, they walked out their final exit with a bagpiper playing the Gordon Highlanders.
Right.
So this is Bagpipes Billy. Here is Bonnie Prince Charlie. These are Walker's cookies from Scotland. They're kosher. And this is a constable who came from London to say, please save us from, what's the mayor there? Sadiq Khan, because we're descending into fifth world chaos. We need an emergency help there. So they come to celebrate Brexit with me. I'd like to add that Brexit took place at about 11:30 p.m. on Friday night, which means that it was on Shabbat of Parshat Bo, which is where Egypt is struck with the 10th plague, and Pharaoh says, get out, just go. No more, I surrender, no deals, no, just go. I surrender, your God is the boss, just go. And in this week's coming Parsha, on Shabbat, Bishalach, they get to the Red Sea because Pharaoh still wasn't willing to give up and the army gets drowned. Now let's come back to the book. The book is, but before I mention the book, I just like to add, to give credit where credit is due, since we've been discussing dialogue and how to get the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japhet, and the 70 nations that came from them, and the hundreds and thousands of tribes, families, and clans of planet Earth to talk to each other. We had a very good example of that last week, and credit should be given. Last week on Sunday, January 26th, the issue of Adam Green came up. Well, I had some communications with Adam after that, and something extraordinary happened, which I think was going to happen anyway. On Tuesday, January 28th, Adam began the first of a series of dialogues with a rabbi or Talmud Chacham from Chabad from Detroit named Reb Dovid, with 4 O's, D-O-O-O-O-V-I-D, Reb Dovid. I listened to a good deal of it, and I have to say I was astonished, because when I listened to it, I thought, and I've written, that they're developing what we call a chavrusa. We have a study partner. In the Jewish tradition, the more advanced one teaches his student who teaches his student. So it's always a chain of teaching and learning. Lilmod v'lilamed, to teach and to learn. So they're developing a chavrusa where they're going to be doing a series of programs together. And as I listened to them talk to each other, I thought this was perhaps the most remarkable chavrusa since Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. People, I don't have time to go into what that symbolizes, but Reb Dovid, when he hears this, will know exactly what I'm referring to. Also, the more I listened to Adam talk, I thought I'm looking at a Gilgul Nefashot, a reincarnation of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was a ger. He became the greatest rabbi of his generation. And he said that before he got on the track of rabbinical studies. If he saw a scholar, he hated them and he wanted to bite them, not like a dog which just pierces the flesh, but like a donkey which crushes the bones. And I wrote to both of them and I said, I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years from now, Adam Green is a rabbi living in Mea Shearim, married to a biblical bombshell beauty with 12 little blonde Israelite warrior princes and princesses running around. There have been cases like this before. God talks to everybody, whether we're listening or not. And there are some very remarkable members of the House of Israel who come from very unusual backgrounds. So I have to give credit where credit is due to Reb David, 4 O's, and Adam for what's the dialogue they're beginning. Now to the book, Cracking the Quran Code. Whoever you're talking to, whether you're talking to tribes, clans, and families, or organizations or institutions, when you're dealing with Arabs and Jews, when you're dealing with, especially with Arabs and Muslims who take their religion seriously, if you don't convince them that making peace, in quotation marks, real peace, fits within their religious framework, you're talking to the wall.
Right.
It's not like the well-meaning people, if they're well-meaning, who thought up this plan, Jared Kushner and the ambassador David Friedman, that may work in Queens between community groups, or Brooklyn, I'm from New York too, who have American values, but that's not going to work in the Arab and Muslim world, as long as Arabs and Muslims believe that the Dar el-Harb and the Dar el-Islam, the world of peace, which is those lands conquered by Muslims, and the world of war is that which is outside of it, that we conquered this, we lost it, there can't be any kind of Jewish sovereignty. As long as they believe that, you're talking to the wall, whether you're talking to the PLO, which doesn't exist, to real tribes or clans. Roseanne is indicating she wants to say something. I have to mute my mic. Okay, it's me.
No peace plan that doesn't originate with tribal grandmothers in the Middle East is ever going to work. And I've been trying for 20-some years to initiate just that, because I think that if we would write that on paper, and I've done it too for everybody, if we would present that to the halls of power, they might see the fact that it's got to be community-based and out of love and concern, the things that grandmothers feel, because the grandmothers of this world are actually raising today's children and always have been, pretty much, in the real world.
And love is the key factor.
Well,
and
it's not just that. Between us and the Arabs is a little issue of Hagar and Sarah.
For this reason, I wanted to read a little passage from Jalaluddin Rumi about unity.
Can I just finish, though? I'll be really brief.
Please, Roseanne.
Sarah and Hagar have got to negotiate, and that's what I've been trying to do for 22 years. And it's happening. It's not in the news and all of that stuff, but there is a dialogue between grandmothers and women in each of these places that are undergoing war. There is. And I'm going to write it up and present it, because without the approval of grandmothers who lead every revolution in every community, let's be real, that's what keeps communities together, are the grandmothers. And I'm not excluding grandfathers either, but the wise elders of every tribe, that's who knows how to take care of people. And when that voice is like being excluded from all peace talks, that's why they never work. So let's include that, and remember that is how our nation, these United States of America, were founded, was on by copying each state being a tribe that sat at the Iroquois Nation panel. So all these things, I think, are just a big deconstruction of this intelligence that is just dawning here on Earth, that we could work together cooperatively to actually solve problems and stop talking about ideology. I love that you said that, David, because it is all phony, and it's just something to to do. But I want to just say this in the end: the Arab Rav of America and the world, who I think their consciousness is in this peace deal, And so that's why I don't think it will work. But they've already come out, the the left-wing Jews of America, in critique of Trump's peace deal, and call it annexation. And this is how they do things, Erev Rav, because they use words, code words, to stop the process of peace continually, because peace is not in their interest. They're actually neocons. But anyway, annexation is such a disgusting word that they would apply to it. It's called sovereignty. Just like Brexit, everything, sovereignty, not annexation. Please be quiet. Thank you.
About the book. In the book, Tracking the Quran Code, God's Land, Torah, and People Covenants with Israel in the Quran and Islamic tradition, written under this is very important. This was not written under the supervision of Israeli Jewish scholars, academics, whether they're religious or left-wing, right-wing, or chicken wing. It was written under the supervision of two Muslim Islamic scholars, Sheikh Abdulaziz Bukhari, no longer alive, head of the Uzbeki Muslim community in Israel and the Naqshbandi Sufi order in Israel, and Sheikh Abdul Hadi Palazzi of Rome, a Khalifa of the Qadariya, a Tariqat Qadariya, the other Sufi, the two biggest Sufi orders of the Naqshbandi and the Qadariya. And so my perspective is completely different than something written under the supervision of non-Muslim scholars in Israel or the West.
Right. Yeah, that's why I think
they supervised it.
I think that my quote from Jalaluddin Rumi, as you have quoted the Naqshbandi supervising your book, and also Sheikh Palazzi
from the Qadariya.
Yeah, I think that this quote is very important for where we are now, and so I'm going to read it to you. Both light and shadow are the dance of love. Love has no cause. It is the astrolabe of God's secret. Lover and loving are inseparable and timeless. Although I may try to describe love when I experience it, I am speechless. Although I may try to write about love, I am rendered helpless. My pen breaks and the paper slips away, and the ineffable place where lover, loving, and loved are one. Every moment is made glorious by the light of love. So the message today from the pew is always to follow the way of the heart, the way of love. And God bless you all, each one in your capacity. If you want to do the usual prayer, Roseanne, for closing, and then followed by the usual prayer by David for closing.
Here's my prayer. May the light of intelligence continue to pierce this realm and every heart and every mind. Amen.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, Roseanne. Please, Reverend David.
Well, there are two things. I always start with there are two things. There are two things I want to say. Whoever said the pew is putting itself on a pedestal, step outside and say it. Secondly, Roseanne and Lowell are having such a terrible influence on me. I mean, I now read the Zohar daily. That's largely Miss Roseanne's fault. And Lowell has this way of getting me worried about things I was never worried about before. You mentioned Marcion last week. I think it was last week. You know, the only official heretic in the whole of Christianity. Everybody's a heretic, but there's only one official one. That's Marcion. And I'd always assumed he was this haunted existential figure. But Lowell's got me thinking, oh my God, was he anti-Semitic? And that had never actually crossed my mind before. So I love my new family on the pew. I love my new friends. And a prayer. a prayer for the grandmothers, a prayer for the grandfathers, a prayer for all people with a mature and loving outlook. Let's not throw away the great resource of experience, of insight, and of age. May Christ Almighty, that's known by so many names in many cultures, bless each one of us on the pew, empower our work, and help us give voice to those that have been silenced in this increasingly confusing world. Amen.
Amen to that, and God bless you all. This was another great episode of The Pew coming to you from the Leo Lion Zagami channel. Thank you all. God bless.